Time now for Newstalk, and our guest for this half hour, Joanne Golden, and she is the tax expert here to take your calls and questions about when you're filing your taxes. You kind of hit a roadblock or something, and you want to know what do I need to do here. The number to call is 793-WKTV. Thanks for joining us. Let's start off with what we were talking about during the commercial break. Explain to me what's going on.
Well, we've got some new rules in 2011 regarding energy credits. Last year, 2010, was the last year you could take like 30% on all kinds of things like windows and garage doors or regular doors, storm doors, up to $1,500. Next year, which is the year we're in now, it's down to 10%, and it only is limited at $500. So I think there's been some confusion because I think even the vendors are confused a little bit. So just know that it's greatly reduced. The one thing that isn't reduced are these solar energy sources like solar water heaters, things like that. Okay. They're still at 30%, and they're sort of an unlimited. EnergyStar.gov is the website to go to, and it really explains a lot. But I wanted to talk about that because we've been seeing a lot of confusion coming in our door about people thinking they had more energy credits than they don't.
Okay.
Right.
So we'll have that information for you in just a moment. But first, I want to go to the phone lines. We have lots of questions. So go ahead. You're live on the air. What's your question?
Hi, my question is, I worked in North Carolina in '09, and I never filed my taxes. And I was wondering if I could still file taxes. I live in New York now.
Absolutely, you should file your taxes, even if it's late. Generally, if you're going to get a refund from wherever you're filing, they're not going to penalize you. But if you owe money, you're talking about penalties that are accruing and interest that's accruing. So it is very wise to go ahead and file those North Carolina returns that you need to do.
793-WKTV. Go ahead. You're live on the air. What's your question?
Hi, I would like to know how and where to treat New York State pension income.
Well, New York State pension income, you must put it on the pension income line on the federal tax return, and then it flows to the pension income line on the state tax return. But in the subtraction line, you subtract out how much you got from a New York State pension. Be really careful though. The pension itself is not taxable in New York generally. But if you receive an annuity that is related to New York State, and that may not be exempt in New York. Your pensions that you earn from New York government generally are exempt, but the annuities sometimes are not, and those you really need to go back to the source and ask them.
793-WKTV. You're live on the air. What's your question?
I'd like to know where you could get your taxes for free.
Oh, actually, there's a group in Utica that's doing it, and I would call the Resource Center for Independent Living. The Resource Center for Independent Living, I don't have their telephone number, but I know that the website for WKTV has a link to that. So it's Resource Center for Independent Living, better known as RCIL.
There you go. And you're live on the air. What's your question?
Yes. Well, I have a DuPont pension, and now they're taking taxes out of it, which they never used to, federal tax. And what do I do?
Well, I would file a tax return, because then you will be able to, if you don't owe tax, possibly get a refund. So you need to report that pension on your tax return, on your 1040. What you can do is call the company, and there is a form called a W-9P. That's P as in pension. And that will tell them, if you can fill that in for them, it will tell them how much you want withheld from your pension. And they should follow that if you want nothing withheld. But be careful, because it may be, if you do owe tax when you file your tax return, it may be better to have money taken out of your pension for the federal.
Yeah, it's there for you. Yeah.
Yes, it's there for you. You've already paid, and
Yeah, exactly.
and so you won't have a problem.
Scurrying around trying to find cash to pay.
Well, yes, and also if you haven't paid enough in, you could be penalized and
that's
have
true.
to pay a penalty.
We have time for another caller. Go ahead. You're live on the air.
Yes. Okay. I'm on disability, and I have custody of my 13-year-old son. Am I still eligible to claim him?
Well, disability income is very interesting because sometimes it's taxable and some disability income is not taxable. Generally, if you've gotten a W-2 for disability income, that's going to go on the wage line, and you may be able to get earned income credit if your income is low enough. As far as whether or not you can take a dependent, that has to do with whether or not you have an agreement with your former spouse, or whether or not the child is of a certain age. And you've got to be careful about that now, because if they're over 18, you may not be eligible. So there's some very key rules. The rules you can find on irs.gov.
Yeah, let's put that website up there real quickly, and you can see it for irs.gov for the federal, for the state tax.ny.gov. And there you go. 18th for the deadline. I was mentioning
That's
earlier
it.
15th, but
no,
yeah,
it's the 18th.
this year.
Yes,
All
we
right.
got a few days reprieve.
Exactly. All right,
Thank
thank you.
you.
The news to go coming up.